Welcome back. It's Mondays with Morley. And so we haven't been on with each other in probably 3 weeks because of crazy schedules. And then last week because of all the chaos. And I'll be honest with you, it feels like it's been 6 months. Do you agree?
Yeah, I feel that way.
You are
We're
in
too
front
busy.
of, are you
We're
in an
too busy
office today?
We're too busy freight trains going in many
It's
directions.
very true. Very true.
Yeah,
You're coming from your office today? Is that what this is?
yeah. Yeah.
Versus
Actually
home?
moving. This is home, but
Oh,
this is where I hang out. Those are over here. Wait, over here are all the little mementos that people have sent me over the years dealing with copper. It's pretty cool. Um, but I'm going to be switching things around and using this office more and more.
nice. How have you been?
I've been wrestling with a not a frozen shoulder, a very sore shoulder. Woke up one morning and it wasn't right. So it's been a couple weeks, and then finally, you'll be happy to know that a fellow chiropractor figured it out. He said, "I had this once, and it's sometimes when your gallbladder doesn't work right, it'll blow out the lats, and when the lats blow out, the rib head will pop out, and the rib head popped out, and then you get this nerve sensation all the way down your arm."
You know, it's
So I know,
funny.
no, it's not funny.
No, it's funny.
What?
We're both dealing with the same thing.
Oh my God.
My shoulder, I can go to here and it stops. But it's
I,
not. But it's not bone. It's muscle.
yeah, mine's not. There's no restriction on movement. Thank God. Knock on wood. It's a nerve issue, and this colleague is a graduate of Logan, and he knows how to do some of the classical body crunch. And he did it Saturday morning, and I felt this pop, and the rib head went back in. I was like, "Oh my God!" It was like I was so excited.
Yeah, it's that. Say that again. So I've also been looking at this a little bit, but the liver gallbladder will blow the lats out. Is that correct?
Yeah, it'll turn the lights out on the lats,
Yep.
and then you've got because of the inflammation, you got cortisol coming in. Guess what that's doing? It's killing the integrity of the connective tissue. So the integrity, there's a lot of laxity. The rib head doesn't have anything to hold on to. It
Yep.
pops out, and then it was good night, Irene. It's been 2 weeks, 2 solid weeks of unrelenting pain, and I've
I don't know why we
now
have a
got,
why do we have such a cortisol problem? I don't understand the issue. What
there's no
stress?
there's no, there's no stress.
No stress whatsoever.
No. So I basically have lost 2 weeks of productivity because it's really hard when it's hard to concentrate when you've got a category 5 raging pain in your arm. But
I understand that. And a Category 5 raging hurricane coming breathing down
outside,
here.
that's right. Yeah. And you're driving with your family trying to get out of Dodge. That's right.
Yeah, what a weird. I'll tell you though, you understand this from a spiritual standpoint. Monday's
Yeah.
when we left, and we left about right around noonish, roughly.
Yeah.
And I had finished everything up in the morning in the house. My wife was finishing up her list of stuff, my list of stuff, and so I took a quick shower before we were ready to leave. And Morley, like I tend to have like some mind stuff pop when I'm in the shower for whatever reason.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And I made a decision at that moment. I was like, okay, this is the most surreal moment that I've been through, meaning we don't know what this is coming in at. We don't know what's going to be left, but we're leaving
Right.
town because we didn't need to like subject our daughter to this. I said,
Yeah.
but I disconnected myself from the material and just going, you know what? If we come back to nothing, we'll just start over.
Yeah.
And it's
Great.
it's a weird feeling like that because, typically in life, you might, go down with a ship, but in a situation like this where there might be a lot of danger that's not necessarily to go through, especially with kids and stuff like that, you make the decision it's better to like not be here and get some more PTSD. But it's weird going, oh, I might come back to nothing.
Nothing. Yeah. Yeah.
And to be not joyful about it, I don't want to say joyful, but like just be okay with it. Like, and not, you're not upset, you're not sad, you're not like, there's like a little bit of a, oh, if it sucked, it would be sad. I'd come back and be a little emotional. but the mindset shift of it's just stuff.
That's big. That's huge.
Do you know what I
Because
mean?
we went through Ida. We weren't living in Hammond, Louisiana when it actually went through. Dr. Liz's daughter was actually living in the house, and she had to hightail it. And we're up here in North Carolina. In fact, we were up in Pennsylvania when it hit, and we got the back end of Ida in Pennsylvania, not knowing the devastation that was taking place in our home, and we ended up having to sell it for a loss. I don't know that I was as stoic as you are right now. I was a little like, wow, this was really very disappointing because we loved that home, and when you come back and you see 4 trees on it,
No, that's.
it's
I mean, again,
a very, very humbling feeling.
if we had come back to nothing, obviously you have your moment you have to process, but at the same
Oh,
time,
sure.
you're just like, okay, like I realize obviously we spiritually we can affect a lot of stuff, but physically in this world, there's only so much we can affect.
That's right.
You
Yeah.
know, so
I
it
think
is.
I think the closest I've ever come to that kind of Zen, years and years ago, someone stole my wallet, and I, of course, initial panic was, oh my god, and I went, wait a minute, I get to reinvent myself. I can start with a new identity. I mean, I was so at peace with having lost
Sure.
my identity, the money, the cards, and then I get a call from security. They found the wallet at the bottom of the elevator shaft with everything but the money. I didn't care about the money.
Money,
It's like,
yeah, money can be replaced. The cards are more of a pain in the butt because you got to do a lot of work on that.
that's right.
Yeah,
They were still there. I couldn't
phone
believe why they
calls
wouldn't.
and everything else.
Yeah, yeah. So
Well, how's
it
Morley
was
doing?
Morley's. You know, actually, I just realized there's a piece of paper I need. Let me run down the hall, get it, because I think it'll be fun for the listeners. I'll be right back.
Okay. Morley is running to get a piece of paper. I don't know what it is. If you've never seen that picture up on the wall behind him, that is him skydiving. I remember that picture.
Oh yeah, yeah, over here.
Yeah.
Oops.
Yep. There you go.
Well, you gotta look at it I can't get my hand. Look at it carefully. You'll see 3 arms. There's a guy. It's tandem, and
Tandem.
the guy was so cool about it. And what you got to do is picture the photographer was 50 feet below me, falling 186 feet per second backwards,
Unreal.
taking pictures.
Taking shots.
I'm like, dude, you're crazy.
Taking shots.
Taking shots. So this is, even though I've been racked with pain, the research doesn't stop,
Doesn't stop.
and I'm amazed at what I'm learning. Um, there's a metabolite. Everyone focuses on vitamin D, right? That's the locomotive. Everyone's got to have the vitamin. I saw a guy today
Vitamin D.
he was walking his dog with he had swimming trunks on, no shirt, and he was probably so proud that he was pumping up his vitamin D. I'm thinking he's making more vitamin A. That's awesome. He's breaking it down. That's great. And there's a metabolite. There's one vitamin D hormone, active D. Well, there's 4 hormones with retinol:
Okay.
9 cis, 11 cis, 13 cis, and all trans retinoic acid. And the numbers relate to where the bend is in the structure. But in any event, by now people should know that vitamin D alone doesn't do anything. It's got to be in the active state. It's got to be hanging out with a vitamin D receptor. Got to have a navigator called RXR. That's a nuclear receptor, and that triad is really important for the immune system. But wait, there's more.
But wait,
I
there's
found
more.
I
There's
found
just
that
$9.99 more.
yeah, it's just a little upsell. There's this 9-cis retinoic acid that makes it work. Nobody talks about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is really cool. So I'm not going to go into that. Just to give people a sense of what's the information that's flowing to me. I guess because I'm willing to accept it and think about it.
You've opened yourself to it.
Yeah. Topic number 2 is an amazing article talking about how in tumor cells. So what people need to know is that in tumor cells, there's not only an accumulation of iron, there is an accumulation of copper. And they love to call it unbound copper just to freak everyone out. And it turns out that active hormone D chelates, chelates, grabs the unbound copper, but only in tumor cells.
Mm.
Like, wait a minute. Do you believe it's just tumor cells? But it's this mind blowing article about this research study for cancer cells, and what they don't really talk about is why is the copper becoming unbound? Well, copper is hanging out inside the mitochondria.
Mm-hmm.
It's inside the matrix of the mitochondria. Copper is actually bound to ceruloplasmin in the matrix of the mitochondria. And what has to happen is the mitochondria need to go through autophagy. It's called mitophagy. It's a
Mm-hmm.
recycling of the mitochondria because they get dinged. They're not as effective. They have to be replaced. Well, in a tumor cell, that mitophagy doesn't work right. Why? Because the lysosome of the cell, the stomach of the cell, needs high energy peroxides. Well, where do the high energy peroxides come from? From a copper dependent process. And so as the copper starts to become dysfunctional in the cancer cell, the, the recycling of the mitochondria breaks down, the copper leaks out, and they blame the copper for the iron induced problem of all of this stuff breaking down. That's the game of medicine, is to blame the the most important mineral in our body for all the problems. So it's just more insanity. Then I came across, um, you may have heard of Park 7, PARK 7. It's also called DJ1. It's also called protein deglycase.
Okay.
I've read a lot of articles, dude, and you've heard of glycation, right?
Yep. Yep.
It's a big problem, like
It is.
diabetes, neurodegeneration, cataracts. Did you know that cataracts is really glycation?
That's not surprising.
No. And guess what? There's an enzyme, protein deglycase, that when the proteins, which are folded, get glycated, they don't work right. So they need to be deglycated.
Okay.
And guess what the battery pack is for that enzyme to work? Ding, ding, ding. I mean, Jason, I've read 10,000 articles. And just last week, I stumbled on this article like, protein deglycase. What the heck is that? And it's like it's opened up this Pandora box of understanding about how the body breaks down because of a lack of copper. I mean, I know I'm a pain in the butt to listen to because it's always the same problem, right? But it's like that that's a real gem of an understanding about how the body works, is that it knows that this glycation is going to happen, so it
Yeah.
invented an enzyme to break it down. But if you don't have that mineral, you don't have that enzyme. So,
That's kind of
um,
important.
what's that?
It's kind of important.
Kind of. Then, then there's a classic article by Dennis Wing, Winge. He's a big copper guy at University of Utah, huge mega star, and he wrote a really important article in 2010 on copper metabolism and the copper chaperones. It's one of the, like, if you're going to read 10 articles on copper, you want to read Dennis Wing's article. There are a bunch of others, but that's one you really want to read because he's brilliant. I've looked at figure one maybe 100 times. It's a really important figure. It was talking about all the movement of different chaperones and getting copper to the right place. I'm embarrassed to say that I never noticed in orange, it couldn't have been any more obvious, but in orange was this MIA40 pathway, which I'm like, what is this? This is just last week, end of last week, and it's not important. It just folds and oxidizes, activates.
It's not important though.
Not important. The proteins that are needed in the electron transport chain.
Oh,
Like cytochrome C oxidase, little things like that. And so, in order to get into the inner membrane, they got to go through this MIA40 pathway. I guess I would have named it something else. Like, this is a really important pathway. It's like, you can't live without this MIA40 pathway. I'm like, what is, and it's like, oh my gosh. And then the article, or the whole subject matter, which we'll talk about today because it's kind of fascinating. The fifth thing that's come my way in the last couple of painful weeks. People have heard of preeclampsia.
this is a huge topic, man.
Big topic, and the only known cure, I put that in air quotes, the only known cure is to have a premature delivery. That's the solution. You got this raging, this induced delivery is considered the only cure for preeclampsia now. I'm like, okay, let's talk about that. And
Let's talk about that.
what's fascinating is it's between 5 and 8% of all pregnancies worldwide
Okay.
result in preeclampsia. And it's a very, very serious condition where you have a wholesale breakdown of the mother's body that then affects the fetus.
Okay.
I mean, basically, the mother's kidneys are blowing apart. The heart not doing well. The placenta is really struggling. The liver is struggling. And depending upon how you approach the subject matter, it's a classic case of you get lost in the trees and you can't see the forest.
Okay.
And depending upon the author, depending upon the academic focus, they'll talk about the most recognized symptoms of it are edema, proteinuria, high protein in the urine, and hypertension. And those are three very serious problems with preeclampsia. But when you pull back the curtain, you realize, well, these are all related to the kidney. All three of them, edema and the protein and the hypertension, are all manifestations of a dysfunctional kidney. Why is that happening? Well, what's really fascinating is there's a tendency when there's a change in energy production, especially in the kidney, it tends to take on salt, and it becomes salt sensitive. And in fact, they have a rat model called the DAHL, DAHL, salt sensitive model for preeclampsia. And don't you know, they've got these poor little rats, these poor rats, that they express preeclampsia like that. And, the breakdown of the kidney and all of the hypertension and all this stuff. And I'm digging. I'm fascinated by this. It's salt sensitive. We've been told to avoid salt, right? And then there are the people who say, well, don't worry about the salt. Just make sure you get extra potassium, which makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just happened to stumble on an article that says, well, a good way to prevent the symptoms of salt sensitive issues is restrict iron intake. So it turns out that it's the iron causing the buildup of salt in the kidney that's starting to create the chaos.
Does that surprise you?
Well, no, but again, you, there are a lot of articles out there that talk about, well, it's proteinuria that's causing preeclampsia. I'm like,
I don't think I've ever heard a good reason for preeclampsia that they've actually given out.
well, there's more. Hold on.
There's more.
So when there's proteinuria, what's happening? You've got albumin is building in the kidney and in the urine, and it's really hard. It's very acidic, which is affecting retinol status. It's like, wait a minute, well, that's going to affect the transport of retinol. It's going to affect the ability to make bioavailable copper, because the copper loading pumps, ATP7A and ATP7B, require retinol as the activating agent to load the copper into all of their proteins and enzymes. It's like, okay, now this is beginning to make sense. And then I start to pick away at that. And just this morning, again, I never can't always keep track of how I ask Google the question, but I stumbled on this article that profiled preeclampsia and iron status. And OMG, this group out of India figured out exactly what was happening with iron, and it was iron in the liver, iron in the heart, iron in the kidney, and it was an iron issue because of a lack of ceruloplasmin expression, the ferroxidase enzyme. And then this afternoon, just before you and I connected, I found another article from India. Those folks out across the way are very clever. There's it's actually 33% lower expression of ferroxidase in a pregnant woman experiencing preeclampsia than a pregnant woman with no issues at all. 33% difference. It was like 534 versus 220 or 206 or something like that. It's a huge difference between the expression, and nobody talks about that. No one's talking about the fact that the symptoms of preeclampsia are very similar to the symptoms of Wilson's disease, which is a very well-known copper condition that's
Right.
discussed in a lot of the literature. And it turns out that basically what preeclampsia is, it's Wilson disease in utero. And you have this breakdown in the ability to make ceruloplasmin and the ability to express the ferroxidase enzyme. Iron starts to build up everywhere, and then you just have this chaos that ensues. And it's absolutely fascinating to see how in conventional research, they're focusing on all these different trees, all the different biomarkers that they're looking for. Uric acid's up, and oh gosh, vitamin A is down, and copper and iron are leaving, and but no one is stepping back and saying, well, here's the forest. It's a ceruloplasmin expression issue, and that's what this group out of India did. It was like they could create the whole gestalt because they understood the importance of that one enzyme.
Totally.
But there's a catch. We're not allowed to do that enzyme. So one of my good friends, who's just a brilliant scientist, got his bachelor's and master's at IIT, India Institute of Technology, which means he's scary bright. Got his PhD in theoretical chemistry at Hopkins, which means I don't even want to know what those classes are like. And he's had diabetes most of his adult life. And he invited me into his home when he started to learn about the RCP. And I said, why am I here? He said, because you're going to cure me of diabetes. I'm like, oh, okay. So we haven't cured him, but he's got his life back. He's got control of his blood sugar levels in a way that he's never had in his entire adult life. Feeling really good about it. But he wants to now dig in on this ceruloplasmin thing. And so I sent him the article about this ferroxidase and preeclampsia, and it's at a medical center that's not far from where he grew up. And he's like, he's going back to India next month in November, going to be there the whole month. And he says, I'm going to find out my ferroxidase assay. He's so excited because what he really
That's
wants
his
to
big
do,
like thing.
yeah, but he wants to bring it back. He wants to
Right.
be able to bring that back. And that would be so cool, is to have access to that. So the thing is, when I started out on this journey with preeclampsia, I had no idea that ceruloplasmin was the pivot point.
Right.
But now, after 3 days of intense research, now it's like it's crystal clear. And I think what's exciting about that is for people to realize that even conditions as vexing as preeclampsia, because it's considered a multi-system, enigmatic, just they don't understand it at all. They don't understand it because they can't get their hands around the fact that copper is really important and iron acts out. And because they can't see that, they can't see those two events, they can't see the bigger picture of what's going on. It's fascinating.
I think I don't know if I've told you this or not, but it's probably been 2 weeks now because last week was a blur. But 2 weeks ago, maybe, I get texts. I did a text because my father-in-law goes to his checks now after his heart stuff,
Yeah.
and he says the cardiovascular surgeon, the cardiologist, all that, everyone says, "Great, you look wonderful. The cardiovascular system looks wonderful, etc." And he says, but I get tired, right? And
Mhm.
he's well over 50% ejection fraction now, so he's enough to go and should have energy, right? Technically,
Yeah, because
he gets tired.
it peaks at a little over 60.
Right,
It's not like
right.
you're looking for 100. So,
No. So they say, let's do some blood work. You might be anemic. What we'll do is we'll do iron injections.
no, no.
So I said, no, we're not doing iron injections. Morley, that's the first thing that, if that blood work comes back as low at all, they will just call it anemic and they will go with the iron injections.
Actually, no.
And he'll get energy from it too. A
For a
short
few
term.
weeks, for about
Yes.
6 weeks. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. That's I call that grade school math.
Yes. I understand.
It's a dipstick. Oh, your iron looks low in the blood,
Yep.
and there's no consideration to what's going on in the heart. That's where the tissue is, the heart,
Correct.
and the literature is very clear. When there is low ferroxidase expression in the heart, you have cardiac remodeling and you get congestive heart failure. Why? Because iron is filling up the heart, and the heart can't make enough energy to do its jobs. That's the part they don't understand. And the guy who figured all this out is Jerry Sullivan. He was an MD, PhD pathologist at University of Florida in Gainesville. And he developed what's called the iron heart hypothesis.
You should send me some of that because my wife is a Gator alum. I think
Okay.
my father-in-law would actually appreciate that because he's a sciencey guy, so he would appreciate that because it comes from the University of Florida. So
No, Jerry Sullivan figured it out. And the way he figured it out was he was comparing the lifespan of men versus women and the morbidity and mortality issues of men versus women. And he had this light bulb moment. Like he said, wait a minute, women are dumping iron for 40 years because of their menstrual
that's
cycle.
right.
That was his aha moment, was he realized, oh my gosh, that's why men die earlier, because we can't dump iron.
It's so
Especially in our
simple
heart.
too, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. I read an article about him. He called up his wife. He was so excited. He was like bouncing off. She was a physician too, and she's like, "What?" She couldn't believe it was that simple.
Simple yet so complex, which is really, you know what? It's so funny. I'll be honest with you. I have not given blood yet because it creeps me out, and yet one of our viewers, Annie, Anne.
Yeah.
She goes by PT Andy 67. She's in the comments. She says, I donated blood last Monday. My blood glucose, my glucose has been lower ever since, and no blood pressure crashing this time. Love getting the iron out and refresh my blood. She is like clockwork with her
Yeah.
bloodletting.
Right. It's the easiest
It creeps me
thing
out, man.
to
It
do.
creeps me out.
What, are you worried about the blood going somewhere, or just that the blood's being taken out of you? What's your fear?
No, I probably wouldn't be as creeped out if COVID didn't happen.
Don't
I
no.
know, but also also the idea. I'm not a needle person. I
Okay.
can look at blood all day long. Once Morley, once the needle's in me, I can sit there and
You're
look
fine.
at it. It's that damn thing going in.
Do you look at it when they do that?
I've done both.
Don't ever look at it. No, you can't look at it because it's an invasive procedure and it stings a little bit.
It does
But
sting. It hurts. There's a little bit of a hurt there. It's like an ache, because you're
right,
piercing through a
but
vessel
you
which
got
has muscle to it.
you got to rise above that and say, I'm getting healthier.
I, how often do you get rid of your blood?
I'm doing it every other month now.
Are you?
Yeah,
Do
every
you
60
feel
days.
do you feel really good afterwards?
Yeah, I do actually. Well,
Is it
it's
because you're giving
interesting.
blood to somebody, or is it because you're
I think
both?
it's multifactorial. I know that for every time I do it, 3 people benefit, and I do too. So that's 4 people who.
Three
Four
people. I
people.
didn't know that.
Yep, 3 people get the blood parts.
And they're getting
Uh,
non-vaccinated blood, which is also positive.
right, right. And I don't know that I've ever felt like a euphoria, like, oh wow, I got rid of a bunch. I just feel good. And what's interesting is I can tell within a day or two that it's time for me to go back. It's in my system, but I don't always keep track of when I'm supposed to go. I've got to find a hitching post. Like I'll go find that corner, that door, and I'll scratch my back, and that's iron building up in my body. And then when I do that, I'll go to my calendar and say, "Oh yeah, I got to go to Red Cross later this week because it's in my system. I just haven't kept track of it. But I can feel it. I can feel it building, and I don't know that I've ever felt a sense of euphoria because I let go of it. But I do feel good about knowing that people are
Yeah,
benefiting from it.
definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you ever get the post-blood cookie and orange juice?
Oh yeah, it's like it's what it's about. Get those little mini Oreo cookies, right? It's the only time I eat junk food is because I know that sugar and iron go together, and you got to get that sugar hit. But I don't do the OJ. I just do water and little Oreo cookie. they're like this big. Oh my god, This-
Freckles
that's my treat.
says.
That's my treat.
Freckles says, I just jumped on and heard you talking about iron. I've been iron pills for 7 years and I'm always still tired. What should I do?
Get the full Monty Iron panel and send it to Jason, and we'll interpret it on air. That's what we do.
7 years of iron pills. I can't tell you to come off, especially if they're prescription. But I personally would not take iron pills.
No, I think the macro question is what's your hemoglobin right now,
Right.
and has it changed in 7 years? If it hasn't changed in 7 years, it's called refractory resistance to the supplement, and that you're not iron deficient, you're copper deficient.
Copper deficient.
That's
That's what
where
I
the
told
correct.
my father-in-law. I said, you're not iron, you're not low in iron, you're copper deficient. It hasn't sunk in yet. I gotta work on some ways to
Well,
around that.
look at it this way: you cannot make heme. It's an 8-step process. 4 steps inside the mitochondria, 4 steps outside the mitochondria. Well, the 4 inside the mitochondria are copper dependent. Most notably, the very first step and the last step, which is it's called ferrochelatase. It's a little crane operator, and it brings iron and drops the iron ball into the center of the heme molecule. So that whole mechanism of creating heme is copper dependent. Then to make hemoglobin, you got to get 2 heme and 2 globulins and knit them together. That's a copper dependent process.
Mm-hmm.
Then the process of making the red blood cell and filling it up, you got to not just fill it up with iron and heme, there's got to be enough energy in there in order to get it to the right shape. It's really important. And there's a marker called RDW, red cell distribution width. If that RDW gets too big, it means there's too much iron because there's not enough energy to get rid of the excess iron. That was the first indication of a problem back in 2020. RDWs were going through the roof because of what that whole experience was all about. But the process of maturing a red blood cell requires copper. Then the recycling of the red blood cell every 120 days, you know, got to take the iron offline and replace it. And we're doing this at 2.5 million red blood cells a second. 2.5 million a second. That whole process of recycling and getting the iron where it needs to be, copper dependent. And those steps are not taught in doctor school. So the whole process of making blood, the real driver of that, the chef of that process is copper. But it's not labeled that way in the literature.
Sending people over to bravetv.com. I just put the link in there for that. And then there's the root cause protocol.com for root cause protocol. How do you get your copper in your body? I just put the supplement. I just put the Recuperate Copper, Whole Food Copper supplement in the link there. They did take. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say to the individual who said she's been taking iron for 7 years, she ought to take Recuperate.
Yes.
And just see what happens.
Here's a question for you. Sorry, go ahead. I don't want to cut you off on that.
No. I just think it would be useful. I think it would be really helpful for her to see the blood work, so
sure.
she could see.
Yeah, 100%.
Because the doctors typically do what I call unicycle blood testing. They just look at iron. They never do bicycle testing, which is iron and copper. And what people don't know is that copper is the back tire attached to the chain driving the bike, and the front tire is iron. People don't know that. They need to know that the back tires was running the show. And so she would benefit from the test, and she would benefit from the Recuperate.
100%. I know so many companies have this. Even Standard Process has this. Is there not a time and a place, but is it harmful to be taking in, whether it's specific to iron or iron just happens to be a part of it when you're dealing with whole food iron? Does that make sense?
It does.
When you're talking about a supplement, let's just say, and it has some whole food iron in it, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm very conservative when it comes to taking iron because I think it's grossly misunderstood. It's been distorted beyond all recognition. And there clearly are foods that were designed to deliver iron. Beets would be a great example of a food that have a wide array of nutrients, not the least of which is iron, but it's in a bioavailable form. Beef liver, historically, beef liver was both iron, but 3 times more copper. There's a lot of copper in beef liver back in the day when it was eating grass before glyphosate. We don't have that luxury anymore. And I think the danger we run now is the whole meme of medicine is that everyone's anemic and everyone's copper toxic. And that's simply not true. It's in fact the exact opposite. And so the belief is I can eat as much iron as I want, and I've got to be careful with copper because it's toxic. And people, very first thing when I recommend copper, the very first thing people say is, "Isn't that toxic?" 100% of the time, that's toxic. And so that programming, that Madison Avenue propaganda, has
that's
done
well said. Madison Avenue propaganda. I love that.
No, but it's true. It's
true.
It's been going on since Jared's Hall. When I was
My
When
God, you're bringing up everything now.
I know when I was a little tyke watching what show, What's My Line? Remember, you know, um, Geritol was one of their main sponsors. And what people don't know is that when that product went on the air, they were sued immediately. It took 10 years for that lawsuit to work its way through the courts. And then at the end of
10
that
years.
10 years, and at the end of the lawsuit, Geritol had to take its ads off. But it had 10 years of propaganda: iron, poor, blood. Now, what's fascinating about that is you'd say, well, that must have been the FDA at work trying to save us and protect us. No, it was the FTC because it was a breach of integrity. They knew that iron iron was not going to help that problem at all.
Right.
And so they were the ones that brought the lawsuit, not the FDA. It was FTC, and it took 10 years for them to win in court. It's absolutely amazing. One of the more embarrassing legal outcomes in our country.
Crazy. Absolutely
It is
crazy.
crazy. It is crazy.
Let's see. No, it's not the blood tests. So she says the blood test work from an indoctrinated doctor is useless. How would I get a true blood test? No, you can get a regular blood test. It's who is actually looking at it and who is
Right. How do you interpret it?
who is interpreting it. It's not that the blood test is useless. It's the interpretation. You have to get somebody who understands the actual numbers.
Yeah, and that's what the root cause protocol consultants are all about. They've
Right.
gone through the training. They know how to do it. You got to go to requestatest.com or go to ultalabs.com, and they have what's called the full Monty iron panel with uric acid. That's the one you want. And it's 12 different blood markers, and you can tell a lot about what's going on in someone's body with those 12 markers.
Somebody says they had Guillain-Barré syndrome in '96 and was told they shouldn't donate blood. I can't remember the reason. Can you donate? I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of that. What you can do is get a mobile phlebotomist. When phlebotomists went mobile was during the COVID era. And so they're much more willing to come into your home, and they destroy the blood. They don't recycle the blood. So if you have any worries about where your blood's going to go, have a mobile phlebotomist come into your home. They don't ask questions. They just say, how much would you like to take out? They're not really strict about, oh, it has to be a pint. It can be 100 cc's. A pint is 500 cc's. Not everyone is ready to do a 500 cc blood draw right out of the blocks. So the mobile phlebotomists are your salvation.
Have you had good reaction reviews with mobile phlebotomists?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah.
A lot of times they're very good too. A lot of times they're very. I mean,
they tend to be better.
Getting the stick is a good thing. Someone who knows what they're doing.
Well, and they've gone out on their own because they know how good they are.
Yes,
and
exactly.
they can make more money. They can make more money
Yep.
on mobile basis. So
100%.
there's a real upside to that.
Good point. Any questions out there? Any crazy clinical stuff you've had in the past week other than what you've told us?
Crazy clinical stuff. The most dramatic in the last few weeks, I think I may have mentioned it, but someone who'd had 30 years of pain that disappeared after a week of recuperate. That's a lot
yeah.
That's a lot of pain.
That's amazing.
No, it is amazing. RCP babies coming online. A lot of people who have struggled to get pregnant or have healthy pregnancies. No issue when they've got more copper in their system. Can't think of any other wild case studies in that.
But always great. Always great.
86-year-old guy struggling with sleep and struggling with muscle fatigue, struggling with memory. And I told him to take one recuperate, and he decided to take 6.
Some ideas.
And when we did the follow-up blood work, his copper was really high. It was like twice what it should be. I was like, Paul, what did you do? And so he said, well, you told me to take one, so I decided to take 6. I said, how's that working for you? He said, well, my memory issues are gone, my muscle issues are gone, and I'm sleeping like a baby. So I'd say it's working.
Stay on it.
86 years old. It's amazing.
Amazing. You have another 40 years to go in life with this stuff.
I know, right? Yeah, right. If I was going to have to do what I was going through the last couple of weeks, I'd say no, I'm not going to do that. But it's actually, it's so cool. With the power of chiropractic, you know it. Your wife knows it. Dr. Liz knows it. But boy, when that rib head went back in place, it was like, oh wow, it's just
What?
instant relief. I couldn't believe it.
So you had the cortisol issue, because I'm going through this too, just in a spot. Are you doing anything for the connective tissue, or do you feel like the copper will help seal
I've
some
been
of that out?
great question. I've been putting copper cream back there and copper serum, and also doing some magnesium oil
Okay.
just to try to calm. So cortisol comes in 2 flavors: cortisol, cortisone. Cortisol is active, and you got to get back to cortisone, which is inactive, and it's a magnesium-dependent process. So you got to get the magnesium back in the tissue, um, and just trying to be careful with my diet right now.
Yep.
I must have had, it must have been too much fat. I don't recall it being
I was
unusual.
gonna say, why did your inflammation kick up? Because I've had similar things. I'm looking at it and I'm like, what? I mean, other than I eat a lot of fat.
Well, I do too. And, I'm sure that there's emotional stress,
Sure.
just life in general. And whether the stuff that was going on in Western North Carolina and Florida, that just felt so wrong. But I don't ordinarily react to that
We're
kind
also
of stuff.
going through a big shift in the world right now that you and I and many of the viewers are also more conscious of. And quite honestly,
Right.
I think the wild card here, this is my personal opinion based on looking at myself from an unbiased viewpoint, looking at my wife who's also going through stuff, looking at you, my colleagues, etc. I think that, and when I say stress, I don't mean everyday stress. I'm not talking about, oh, I forgot to take the garbage out. I'm talking about the energetic stress around us. I think our own individual spiritual worlds, as well as the overall spiritual, I think that right now is the biggest component of why we're all battling this. Because
Yeah,
I've looked at
we were
everyday
saying,
stress and I'm like, we're like kind of immune to some of this stress now. Business owners, like life, like stupid people, like I think
right,
it's the unseen.
absolutely agree. And I think I think what you're alluding to is an energetic shift that's occurring.
Yes.
And we were chatting with our uh, other chiropractor, really sharp cookie, and he keeps track of the sunspot activity. He
Yeah.
said he said we've been bombarded the last
We've
week.
been hit hard in the last 2 weeks.
Is that what it is? No, last
Yeah,
two
like
weeks.
that. I think they actually had I think they call it an X7 or X10, the largest sunspot they've ever seen had popped out.
Wow,
Yeah, it was off the radar. Like it was big.
that's incredible. Well, and maybe that's. I said, could that be driving this? He said, "Well, anything can be a factor. So I'm sure that's part of the dynamic. But I've heard that burst of energy is unlike anything we've ever experienced. They were saying, um, I was talking to one of our colleagues. She was saying that her neighbors were looking at the aurora borealis in their backyard here in North Carolina.
Yep.
I'm like, what? And I remember seeing it up in Minnesota, being just a few miles from Canada. That's one thing.
No,
But to
the
see it,
magnetic pole is shifting and we're seeing some of that stuff now.
is that what it is?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that good news? I don't know. I mean,
Yes, well, yes and no. I mean, it's going to whip some people's butt, but yes, because we're going through the shift. I mean, there's been talk in the last couple of weeks of manipulation of weather. There is definitely manipulation of weather, but what people really aren't keeping an eye on, which is I think is a bigger component,
yep.
is magnetic shift, pole shift, and actual sunspots. Now, the problem is some people say that's not true because they're in the psyop of flat Earth, and But like if you look at this from a reality standpoint, the sun is absolutely kicking off major
Right.
flares,
Right.
and the magnetic pole shift is happening. Like I mean, they're physically tracking that, and that has to do with iron and copper as well. I mean, you're literally dealing with the core of the planet. So it's very interesting. It's a very interesting world to study.
Especially now, at this particular time, at
Right.
this juncture. And is there a window? Is there a relief in sight, or is this something we just don't know about?
I think there will be an energetic relief in under 6 months.
Okay, that makes sense.
But then I think there's also a giant release in about 7, 8 years.
Hmm, that's a long way out.
Yeah, but that's like also eternity at that point too. So
That's
it's
true.
I think all of these religions are all drawn from the same spot, and even though they all claim that they're different, they're really not all different. They're all really similar, and they're all coming from the same source originally.
Yep.
And I think we're headed towards that promised land. Let's just say that, because whether someone believes that Jesus is literally coming down in the flesh and blood and fixing this, or you believe in consciousness and Christ consciousness, both of
Hmm.
them still work, and both of them are still. It's all coming back. Let's just say that people are waking up. Everyone's waking up. Humanity's waking up, and it's unstoppable at this point.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense, and I certainly ascribe to that. Just being human, you want it to happen yesterday,
Yuff.
and it's this has been for me. My real wake up began like in 2010. So it's like, and I've met people who've been focusing on this twice that long, and it's amazing to think about how gradual the change is. There's no question it's happening.
Right.
It's just we're looking for seismic change, and it's not going to happen like that. It's very, very
Right.
gradual.
But it's probably about 3 months ago, I started feeling like a little bit of discomfort. I'm like, that's a
Yeah,
little strange. Okay, we'll leave it alone. Now
yeah,
keep in mind the muscles need to be worked on because it's they have not been touched much, and I could use some like deep tissue therapeutic massage. But then I get to the
right.
point where like, wait a second, I can't like lift. And my wife goes, well, you're getting old or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay, that's not it. And I go, and I'm like, what? And then she goes, maybe it's labrum. I went to Charlotte. Somebody had shockwave therapy. They did a little bit of that. That helped it.
Right.
But I was like, and she goes, and I said, I mean, there's an old injury there. I said, but that was like a whole injury is just me overthrowing wiffle balls, like not like baseballs or
Right.
wiffle. Like
Right.
we overthrew when we were playing in school. I go, but other than that, nothing else. However, I consume a tremendous amount of fat on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And I'm also been taking a lot of herbal products to relieve or help the liver. And
Okay.
so it's
Yeah.
funny when I had a colleague of mine look at my muscle, she goes, your lats. It's like your lats are so inflamed. I'm like, what's that for? And then when you said lats become inflamed and
Yep.
cortisol is anti-inflammatory, I'm like, oh shit, maybe. And my wife, maybe I should listen to my wife. My wife 6 months ago, she goes, I think you're eating too much fat. I think your gallbladder's under stress. I'm like, yeah, you don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. What do you know, right? Yeah.
And so she
Well,
said that like 6 months ago. And
time
then
you grow.
and then she told me, she goes, I think I think it might be a labral tear. I'm labral tear. What are you talking about? So I go to the
Wow.
other doctor on Wednesday or whatever it was. He goes, it could be your labrum. I'm like, don't say that.
I think you know what it is.
Yep.
And it's emotionally driven too. As you said,
100%.
we're all dealing with a lot of stress. And what really unlocked my shoulder many years ago with Dr. Liz was there's a little pterygoid muscle,
Mm-hmm.
and, and she would put full force of her weight on that pterygoid muscle. It was very painful,
Oh, yeah.
but as she did it, that's when my arm went up, straight up. Couldn't believe it.
Have you ever had internal muscle work done, like in the mouth?
Oh no, she was inside my mouth, inside my mouth.
So much pain, but so much relief.
Absolutely. I don't think I'd ever experienced pain like that.
I literally cried on the table. I've had it done twice, and I was like in tears on the table.
Yeah, I believe
And
it.
you're kicking, and you're just like, I can't do this. And then when he releases, you're like, oh my God, thank you.
It's right. Absolutely. Yeah. No, it's an amazing sensation. But it sounds like dietary and maybe some deep work inside
Yep.
your mouth would be really good.
More protein, less fat, maybe.
Well, right. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Well, it's good to see you again.
Likewise. It's been too
Been
long.
a long time. And you keep rocking and rolling.
I
You keep
will.
studying, and
I will.
we'll keep doing what we need to do.
Absolutely. Appreciate the opportunity, and we'll do it again next week, hopefully.
Thank you, sir. Everybody, it's Morley Robbins. Mondays with Morley. Everybody have a great rest of your Monday. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye bye.
Health, freedom, knowledge. This